What's up, you guys? It's Graham here. So we got a major problem. Back in 2022, the billionaire Ray Dalio posted a 43-minute long video predicting the impending downfall of every major economy as we know it, based on predictable cycles that repeat throughout history without fail. Well, sure enough, looking back, a lot of what he predicted wound up coming true. Inflation surged, asset prices exploded, precious metals hit all-time highs, and global tensions escalated. All signals that a new world order isn't coming. It's already happening. Except now there's a bit of a twist. As of a few days ago, Ray Dalio just posted that the world order has officially broken down, meaning we are about to enter the last and final debt cycle, the part where consequences become irreversible, and most people have no idea what comes next. That's why we need to talk about exactly what he predicts is about to happen, why these cycles are completely predictable if you know what to look for, and how you could best prepare going forward. Because like it or not, financial shifts don't hurt the people who know what's coming. They hurt the people who assume that nothing changes. Although before we start, if you appreciate videos like this that I am filming literally on the road at a random Airbnb to get this out in time, it would mean the world to me if you hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done that already. I know it's dumb to ask, it does help out tremendously, and as a thank you for doing that, here's a picture of a stingray. So thanks so much, and also a big thank you to Gemini for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. Alright, so in terms of where to start and how this is likely going to end, it's important to understand the 6 economic cycles. See, according to Ray Dalio, there's a predictable pattern that all economies consistently go through, and it's not random. He believes it's only a matter of time until eventually this all plays out, and it begins with first, a new world order begins. This usually comes after a major crisis or conflict resets the entire system. Think post-World War II, when the US dollar became the world's reserve currency and global cooperation increased. This all leads to the next step, the growth phase. Essentially, opportunities rise, wealth is created quickly, and optimism is high. This results in third, peak prosperity and power. At this point, the country's currency becomes the global reserve. Financial markets lead the world, military budgets increase, and living standards are high. But beneath the surface, debt begins to rise. The wealth gap widens. All of a sudden, financial speculation outpaces financial productivity. And as you would expect, this leads to fourth, financial imbalances. Pretty soon, debt grows faster than income. Asset bubbles form. Inequality intensifies, and political polarization increases. On top of that, trust in institutions declines substantially, and people begin to feel like the system is rigged against them instead of working for them. This means the only outcome is fifth, conflict and disorder. This means that social unrest becomes a lot more common. At the same time, rival powers challenge the dominant nation. Trade pressures escalate, money printing increases, and currencies face competition. For context, this is the point that Ray Dalio last warned us back in 2022, and now he argues that we are entering the 6th and final phase before the economy resets, and that would be 6th, the New World Order. Ultimately, this happens when the stress of debt, money printing, inequality, and political unrest gets to a point that can no longer be sustained. When this occurs, governments are forced to restructure debt. Currencies might be devalued to reduce the burden. Wealth distribution policies often emerge, and the global balance of power can begin to shift. Now, sometimes this transition can be managed through policy or reform, but either way, the old system stops functioning the way it once did, and a new system takes its place. Then the cycle repeats itself once again from step 1. However, if we zoom out and take a look at exactly what's happening today, the reality is that not all of these happen at the exact same time. And in terms of what Ray Dalio says is most likely going to happen next, we have to take a look at the 5 types of global conflict. See, the way he sees it, when the balance of global powers begins to shift, countries don't jump straight into war. Instead, they begin to escalate in several areas that most people don't even realize. And the first line of defense is often trade and economic wars. This is when countries try to weaken each other through tariffs, export restrictions, and supply chain pressure. So instead of direct face-to-face conflict, they make it more expensive to do business, restrict key goods, and attempt to damage the other country's economy from the outside in. That also leads us to second, technology wars. The truth is, whoever controls AI, semiconductors, and energy technology has a huge advantage, which is why the US is now blocking China's access to advanced chips while China pushes ahead with their own programs. Like even today, those export bans expanded even further, making it a full-on zero-sum game for innovation dominance. That's also leading to 4, we have capital wars. This one is basically just financial warfare. Countries use sanctions, freeze assets, and cut off banking to hopefully restrict the other side's ability to do business. This was seen in 2022 when Russia had their reserves frozen. And Ray Dalio specifically flagged this, noting that governments have historically used asset freezes and embargoes well before any fighting actually takes place. And fourth, on top of that, we could also see geopolitical wars. These are battles over influence, alliances, and important locations around the world. So instead of direct combat, countries compete through partnerships, defense agreements, and diplomacy to gain control over certain regions or major trade routes. Kind of like what was happening throughout Greenland recently. And finally, number 5, we have the last resort, and that would be military wars. Historically, by the time tensions reach this stage, the economic, political, and technological conflicts have been going on for quite some time. And at this point, both countries face an impossible choice: fight and risk enormous cost, or back down and appear weak. Now, I will say, Ray Dalio's point isn't that all of this necessarily leads to war, but it is to say that when the global powers begin to shift, competition between countries begins to increase. And if you zoom out, you could see that this has been going on for quite some time before most people even recognize what's going on. So in terms of what to expect, what he says will inevitably come next, and the blueprint that you would be able to use to come out ahead, here's what you came for. Because if history is any guide, by the time it feels obvious, it's already too late. Although really quick, while we're on the topic, here's what I've noticed. When the market looks uncertain, people lose jobs, volatility spikes, and everything reprices to a new normal. That's why I place such a big emphasis lately on diversification. So instead of just being all in stocks or real estate or cash, I'm able to get a bit of everything. And that's actually where our sponsor, the Gemini credit card, comes in to help. This is really interesting because instead of earning airline points that you forget about or credit card points that you barely use, this allows you to earn cryptocurrency back on everyday purchases. So whenever I'm out at restaurants, buying groceries, or filling up the gas tank, I'm able to get exposure to a completely different asset class like Bitcoin. Or in this case, you get to earn up to 4% back on transportation, 3% on dining, 2% on groceries, and 1% on everything else with no annual fee. This means I don't have to time the market or go out of my way to buy it myself. It's just done automatically without me even thinking about it. Not to mention it comes in 6 unique stainless steel colors. You can get black, silver, rose gold, Bitcoin orange, XRP, or the brand new Solana edition. Personally, I prefer earning Bitcoin back on my purchases, but if that's not your thing, you could also select from more than 50 different cryptocurrencies that you could switch to at any time. Plus, you could check out more information on rates and fees down below in the description, or see if you're eligible with no impact to your credit score. In all seriousness, in a world where anything can flip overnight, having multiple investment streams building, even passively in the background, just offers an extra layer of resilience. And I also just legitimately use the credit card all the time. So if you want to instantly earn Bitcoin or select from dozens of others, just visit gemini.com/Graham or click the link down below in the description to learn more and sign up. Again, that is gemini.com/Graham with the link down below. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the video. All right, now in terms of Ray Dalio's theory, what he expects is going to happen next and how you could best prepare. Here's where things are getting crazy, because there is one more aspect that he considers to be the most dangerous of them all, and that would be the debt crisis. Look, here's the reality. The US national debt is currently sitting at roughly $38.7 trillion. It's growing by approximately $8 billion every single day. And here's the part that's unbelievable. Interest payments have now surpassed $1 trillion a year, meaning we are now paying more in interest than we are on our entire national defense. Let that sink in. This also means that, for context, we are in debt about $113,000 per citizen. And it's only getting worse. Now, in terms of what Ray Dalio had to say about this, he was pretty blunt. He said that our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, not even born yet, are going to be paying off this debt in devalued dollars, and that debt crises like this typically develop slowly until it happens all at once. This suggests that history is again repeating itself, just like Ray Dalio warned. And when countries begin to grow the deficit to this degree, they don't just say, "Hey guys, sorry, we can't pay today. Too bad." Instead, they begin printing more and more and more money, which further devalues the currency, causes them to print even more money to cover the deficit, and this has been seen throughout every past economic reset that we've ever seen throughout history. So with US debt to GDP now above 120%, Ray Dalio argues this isn't some far-off event. It's happening right now before our very eyes. This is why his recent investment advice was pretty aggressive. He said that you have to stop thinking about traditional investing in the safe sense of buying bonds and treasuries, and start purchasing assets that the government can't print into oblivion. Or I guess put more simply, at this stage in the cycle, the reward for lending the government money and getting paid back in interest is almost never enough to compensate for the lack of purchasing power thanks to inflation. Now, interestingly, he did not mention Bitcoin or cryptocurrency as an inflation hedge in times like this, even though a lot of people assumed that he would mention this. Instead, he pointed to gold's track record during prior crises. And now with gold around $5,000 an ounce, it's clear that some investors have already been taking his advice. So in terms of how this could play out and what this means for your money, there are 3 scenarios that Ray Dalio believes could come next, with the first being Path 1, the disorderly decline. I think it goes without saying, but Ray Dalio says this is the highest risk category, that basically no one does anything, nobody touches the deficit, they keep kicking the can down the road, and eventually it becomes unsustainable. At that point, we're forced into some combination of currency devaluation or a default just to keep the system running, at the same time that fights over wealth and fairness start dividing people at home. And once a country starts arguing internally, it becomes that much more difficult to protect itself against outside forces. If this were to happen, things would downward spiral pretty quickly. We're talking a market correction of 20 to 40%, major losses for anyone holding long-term debt, and the balance of global economic power could begin to change pretty quickly. However, it doesn't have to be that way, because we could have Path 2, a managed decline. This one requires something that we haven't seen in a long time, and that would be bipartisan cooperation. For example, Ray Dalio proposes what he calls the 3% solution, which would essentially reduce the deficit by roughly 3% with spending cuts and increased revenue, while also negotiating outcomes with China that benefit both sides. Now, the trade-off here is that growth slows down, but stability improves, and the US can still remain a leading power. It's just not going to be the only one. Or there is always Path 3, the renewal. Now, this is the one that everybody wants, but is probably the most unlikely to happen, because in this scenario, the entire country comes together, AI infrastructure increases, the wealth gap begins to close, and we extend the current cycle like the most successful empires in history have managed to do. But it requires a level of unity that so far we just quite haven't seen. Now, there is one more scenario that was often mentioned in a lot of these comments that Ray Dalio didn't talk about, and that would be what's called the AI reset. Basically, the argument here is this: if artificial intelligence can boost the productivity of certain industries by 5 to 10 times, it could turn what looks like zero-sum rivalry into positive-sum growth, where there's enough abundance for everyone to prosper without taking a shrinking piece of the pie. In theory, that kind of productivity could ease debt pressures, raise the standard of living for everybody, and really ensure that the entire country prospers. But there is a bit of a catch. This only works if the gains are shared equally across society instead of just the top few becoming insanely wealthy. And so far, we haven't quite done that. So in terms of what I personally think, if there's any truth to what's going on and how I am investing my own money, here's what you came for. Look, I think Ray Dalio's framework is largely correct. The cycles do repeat, the warning signs are there, and last week's Munich Security Conference pretty much confirmed that we're living through one of these transitions, whether we like it or not. However, there are 3 things to keep in mind before making any major moves. Number 1, Ray Dalio has been making these predictions since 2022. And even though a lot of his theories have come true, we have yet to see a full-blown collapse. The reality is, the cycles that he describes typically take place over many decades, not months or years. And the fact that maybe he's early doesn't mean he's wrong. It's just this could take a lot longer than most people's attention spans. Now 2, when